hope you had an amazing few days. It's so great to just be inundated with everybody who cares about security and all the different facets of it. So today we're going to talk about workforce identity. So you have a workforce. You have them somewhere in an identity provider, and you want to light up generative AI apps. You want to light up data analytics. You want them to have access to all the data, but you want it to be based on their identity so that Bridget is always Bridget. And so that's what we're going to talk about today. So this is what the next hour looks like. I'm going to talk about a journey to a more user-aware or identity-aware AWS, creating a user-aware AWS environment, connecting your corporate directory to AWS. I'll talk a little bit about a customer who we worked with to light this up in production. There is a reInvent talk that actually has the customer talking, so I'm just going to summarize. But I think it's really important to realize that this does actually work in production and help simplify your data access based on users. Then we're going to deep dive, and we're going to go a little deep. We're going to do some token dances. We're going to talk about authentication, some assume role stuff. My hope here is that if you really understand how the tokens are passed around and how you understand how auth happens and the identity gets passed through, you will understand how to use this and power your analytics with user-aware access controls. Then we're going to pop out to the side a little bit, and we're going to apply the same exact concepts to generative AI with Q for Business. And then I'll wrap up. I'll tell you all the things to take home with you. So you might be like, Bridget, we haven't heard this journey to a more user-aware AWS. We haven't heard about user-aware AWS. So I want to talk about it a little bit, and I like to talk about where AWS was and where it's going to. So for years, AWS has been superb at launching and having cloud infrastructure services. These are your buckets, your instances, your Lambda functions, your step functions, like all the things, right? You all know that very well. And you would set up federation from your corporate directory into an AWS account. Great, everyone knows that pattern. But with the growth and a lot of apps on the way, we call these AWS managed applications, like your Amazon QuickSight, your Amazon Q, where the workforce needs to authenticate into an application bubble. But they also need data access. They also need user-specific experiences. And so as we started to talk to our customers about these managed applications experiences, this is what we heard. We want customers to make sure their workforce users have access to the data and the correct access at every layer. So no matter what thing you put on top of it as they traverse through, they always are Bridget, and their access control always depends on them or their attributes. They want to be able to audit the specific users who have access. They want to add chatbots that have more personalized experiences. And we need AWS to know who these users are, and that they should be able to start at an application and then use the targeted use cases for those applications. So I would like to introduce a user-aware AWS. I would also like to introduce Pickles. Pickles is my horse. He's also our engineer for the day. So all of our examples are going to be Pickles-based. And what a user-aware AWS is you connect your corporate directory once to AWS. Data access is based on user identity and groups. This makes sure that Pickles actually can get the access that he needs and can't get the access that he doesn't. Personalized experiences are lit up because they're specific and personalized to Pickles or horses. And as Pickles goes through AWS, Pickles is always Pickles, and he's not transforming identities. So how does this work? Let's talk about creating a user-aware AWS environment. So here are the ingredients. You have your corporate directory. These would be your Ping, your Okta, your Untras, whatever corporate directory you have. This does not need to change. You will use this. You will connect it to AWS. So you need an AWS environment, an AWS organization that has multiple member accounts. And then obviously you're going to be using services and applications like I just mentioned. Also, the ingredients are data and analytics. Hopefully you have some data in AWS, whether that's S3, maybe some lake formation tables, Redshift, lots of data services. And then hopefully you're exploring or have already started using some applications. And we have, I think, about 38 applications and probably more on the way. But some top ones that I hear recently in my conversations with customer are Q Developer, Q for Business, QuickSight. Those seem to be quite popular these days. So lighting up a user-aware AWS, 3 parts. First, connect your corporate directory to AWS. You only have to do this once, and you're going to do it via IAM Identity Center. So you bring your identities connected to Identity Center. Via SCIM, we sync and store your identities so they are available to all those apps and all those services for that user-aware experience. Then you can specify data access controls based on the identity or the groups or the attributes that you care about, right? So, and the way that this is possible is a feature called Trusted Identity Propagation. So if I had to, we also call it TIP internally, TIP. So you might want to take a pro tip away from this and go investigate and learn about trusted identity propagation. There's my joke of the day. And so you can specify these access controls, but the coolest part is all the TIP-enabled services and experiences in AWS will log the user through. And that way you will know who accessed your data. You also can have, say, in lake formation, horses are allowed to access this table. And furthermore, we're taking that same foundation and putting it into generative AI so that Pickles is always Pickles, as Pickles may work with a chatbot to ask questions about your wikis. And so that's the little sneak peek of the demos that I'm going to show you. All right, so I mentioned Identity Center at the beginning, and we're going to talk a lot about Identity Center today. But the one thing I need you to take away, because Identity Center, there's been a lot of confusion about what it is and what it's not, so I have some myths that I'm going to demystify today. But you use Identity Center to connect your workforce to AWS. You connect it once, a bunch of stuff gets lit up if you want to use it. So we do store, have a user store for your AWS organization, so we sync users via SCIM. We do it once, lit up everywhere. This also means that from member accounts, AWS application access can happen. You can instantiate QuickSight, you can instantiate a Connect instance, and all of that. And then with Trusted Identity Propagation, we make sure all those users are available all the way through AWS, so you can have user-specific data access and personalized experience. So myth number one that I'm going to bust is you have to use IAM Identity Center as your identity provider. False. Yes, Identity Center has a tiny native store. This would probably be for very small customers, maybe startups getting started. They don't have an identity provider yet, like a Ping or an Okta or an Entra or whatnot. And so the goal with Identity Center is you continue to use your identity provider wherever it is. This is your source of truth for your workforce. You connect it to AWS via Identity Center, and then we make it available for all of your AWS workloads. So like I mentioned, Identity Center does have additional functionality. So you can use these features, but you don't have to. So one, we have this native identity store. So if you don't have an identity provider, this is not very many customers, people just getting started, or maybe for your personal, like I will demo it today because I have a very small org for my demo setup. We also allow provisioning of IAM roles for human access to AWS accounts. What we found is a lot of customers already have a system, whether they purpose-built this for their own company or they've procured one from a third party. So we do this too. You can use it. It's kind of great, but you don't have to. And then the other thing is most customers are going to connect their identity provider at the org level so that it's available all the way through. But if you're not ready to do that, you can connect it for just an account instance of Identity Center. This is really helpful to just kind of get started, get some feelers out, just see if you want to light up some apps. This brings us to our next myth that I'm going to bust, is if you use Identity Center, you have to use it for managing access to AWS accounts and IAM permissions. And this is false. The truth is you can enable Identity Center and continue to use your existing tools that provision IAM roles for human access, federate into AWS. You can use your existing stuff. You do not have to use the account access feature inside Identity Center. You can also take it a step further and you're like, I don't want to use that at all. I don't want it to be available. We've actually published a blog post that shows you how to use service control policies to restrict it, so you don't need it. So you can continue to use your existing tools for human access via roles to AWS accounts. So on a serious note, this is Pickle's serious face. This is his horse show game face. Use Identity Center to connect your workforce to AWS. That is its main use case. And you don't have to use all the functionality available to you. All right, now that I got my point across, Connect your corporate directory to AWS. What does this look like? So you can see on the screen, we have our external IDP. You configure the relying parties, you configure the SCIM, you have your groups, you have your users. This should all be normal. You all know what this looks like inside your identity provider. Via SCIM, it goes over to AWS in Identity Center. That's the identity source. You set the identity source, and then you enable programmatic visioning, and we sync it up, we store it, and then this becomes available to all the applications. So you can see this is Okta. This is going to be what I'm going to use for my identity provider today. You connect it to AWS Identity Center. It's all there, and then the rest happens. You only have to do this once. And your IT admin team is most likely the team that's doing that. So identity information in AWS. Connect your identity provider. Users and groups are synced in attributes. They're refreshed based on SCIM standards. And then your local administrators get to grant access to those groups. So now your workforce is connected. This is where it gets exciting. The rest was just set up. What's next? You can connect once and access lots, right? So you have your personalized experience. That's our Q offerings, Q for Business, QuickSight. You have a bunch of host applications that you can supply chain, connect, all the things. And then what we care a lot about today is the user-aware access to data. And so this is what you can light up once you connect your workforce. This brings me to my third myth, is that you have to provision the AWS managed applications from the Identity Center instance, which will be in your org's management account. That's not many people go into that account very often, right? And so that is actually not true. What ends up happening is once you connect your Identity Center, your identity provider, and use Identity Center, you go into the member accounts, and anybody with, let's say, connect permissions can instantiate a connect application and connect the Identity Center for the workforce to come in and federate into Connect. Same thing with lake formation. You go in, you have lake formation permissions, you connect it to Identity Center, which will say, and then you'll say, horses have access to this table. So this is the customer story that we're going to talk about. And this was a real story of what a customer did with user-aware data access, right? So this was their previous setup. They had a data user, they had a corporate workspace, you had to request access, there was an approval stage, it triggered some admin flow, there was a manual workaround. Does this sound painful? Are you cringing a lot right now? Yeah, okay, and you might have tools like this right now. The challenges this customer had was manual identity provisioning, authentication and hard-coded credentials, fragmented experience. So they had sensitive data requirements. They needed strong authentication and authorization mechanisms. They needed some data governance, especially around data ownership and approval models. They needed a catalog where there was sensitive data and establish that owner. And they needed to comply with a new data governance process. So what did they do? They had Entra. They connected to Identity Center. They configured Redshift with Identity Center. They define groups in the IDP, and that is the source of truth because all of the access controls, and this is the Redshift role-based access control. Go into Redshift, horses are allowed access to this table, humans are allowed access to that table. And so their new flow is data user comes in, requests access. There's some approval stage. You want to make sure people don't get access to all the data, right? And then what happens is the user gets added to a group, and then access works. So user get added to a group, that gets skimmed into Identity Center. Redshift is able to know that about the user, and Redshift can have grant the appropriate access. Automatic provisioning, no hard-coded credentials, and centralized government. Sounds pretty sweet, huh? So this is kind of what their architecture looked like at a very high level. You had the data user going into the analytics tool, federate in through their identity provider. The identity provider and Identity Center trusted each other. Then as they queried data in Redshift, Redshift said, hey, Identity Center, is Pickles a horse? And Identity Center were like, yeah. And then Redshift can say, okay, they have access to this sensitive data of carrots. So what were the business outcomes for this customer? Centralized identity governance across applications, no hard-coded credentials, reduced administrative and operational load. We are all in a day of moving faster and getting people to move faster. Enhanced security measures, scalable access control, and comprehensive logging activity. Because what I didn't mention in the last slide is every time that user made a query for the analytics tool, it popped up in CloudTrail or in Redshifts logs, depending on the tool. All right, you guys ready to go talk about some token stuff? Maybe? All right, so we're going to jump into user-aware data access. So we set up Identity Center. We're going to connect our data services to IAM Identity Center. We're going to allow passing of the user context from service to the downstream services, and then we're going to audit user-specific data access. So this is what winning looks like. So this is the example we're going to work through today. I know it's a lot, but we're going to revisit this multiple times to break it down for you. All right, so we have pickles. Authenticates and queries. Goes to, today we're going to use the query editor with Redshift. There will be some local tables in there. There will be some federated tables. Those federated tables come from lake formation with data stored in S3. And what's going to happen is at each step of the way, the Redshift, the lake formation, the S3, Redshift is going to obtain pickles details by talking to Identity Center via token, use and log pickles details. So this would be used like an access control. Does pickles have access? Do horses have access? And then Redshift's going to pass the identity down to lake formation. Lake formation is going to go do the same thing. Going to go obtain pickles details. Is pickles still authenticated? Is pickles still even an employee at this company? Is pickles still a horse? And then use it for access control, log it, and then pass it down to S3. And then S3 will just log that pickles had the access, because the access control lives in lake formation itself. So this is the setup, and I want to talk through this because it does truly matter, and it also comes with a benefit. So you connect your applications to Identity Center. Why do you need to do that? You need to do that so that at each step of the way, those services can talk to Identity Center to get the correct information about pickles and his groups. You assign your users and groups access to the application. Why do you need to do that? Well, we have to make sure that pickles can authenticate into Redshift or go to lake formation and make sure there's access there. Then you're going to connect your applications with trusted identity propagation. So this is tip. And you're going to do this via a role. So trusted identity propagation in its simplest form is a role talks from service A to service B, and it has a little user identifier on it, and it just passes it through. This role is really powerful, and I'm going to mention this a few times, is because this means it's an IAM credential. And an IAM credential in AWS is really powerful because it means all of your guardrails, your service control policies, your resource control policies, your guardrails, your data perimeters that you put on your AWS environment still apply. And that is the power of this. We pass the identity around, but the coarse-grained guardrails that you have on your roles always apply. So this is what we'll kind of do this in the demo. This is what your Redshift configuration looks like. You can see it has a role. We'll talk about that. You can see we've enabled trusted identity propagation to lake formation, and you can see the Identity Center instance that it's connected to. This is lake formation. As you can see, we have the Identity Center instance that it's connected to and the role itself. Okay, so we're going to go into a demo. I'm going to do live demos today, because why not, right? If it messes up, you all can just cheer me on. Sounds good? Let me press the button. All right. When I am in Chrome, I'm going to be more of an administrator. When I am in Firefox, I'm going to be Pickles, the dev. All right? So I'm Bridget, the administrator. I'm actually going to go into my management account. Oops, I need to log in. Typing a password when you do a demo live is like the most nerve-wracking thing ever. So I'm going to go in. I'm going to show you my Identity Center instance. And if you were paying attention, you would see that there is an instance here. And you'll see the applications. What applications should we see? Redshift and lake formation. Look at what we see. We see Redshift, two of these, one for Redshift itself and one for the query editor. And we also see lake formation. You can also see where my next demos are going to be with Q for Business. Okay, the other thing we're going to look at is we have our users. These are coming in from Okta. We have Pickles and we have Bridget. This is the one I just authenticated with, and you can see what type of groups we have. We have human users and horse users. How convenient is that? All right, so that is number one, and we've already talked about the applications. I'm gonna go into a member account, and this is where you will see, we'll go to Redshift and we'll go to lake formation. So I'm actually going to preload just to get things moving. So we have lake formation here, identity center, and you can see what I just showed you. So that's all connected and all working. I'm also going to show you this. We have our tables, human and horse tables, and we have our data permissions. I'll probably show you this a few times, but I just want you to get used to it. Very similar aspect to Redshift. Where are we here? Identity center. Click on your Redshift instance, and you can see it's all connected. All right, so we are set up. So we're going to go configure user-aware data access. So we've made sure that Redshift is connected to Identity Center. We have made sure that lake formation is connected to Identity Center. Checkbox, checkbox. And we've made sure that Redshift can pass the information to lake formation. That was the trusted identity propagation. I'll show it on the next one. I didn't point it out specifically. Okay, this is where we get into some user detail stuff. So what happens is Pickles is going to log into Redshift Query Editor via his identity token from the identity provider. Identity Center is going to introspect that token. It's going to verify that Pickles' user session is still valid, going to determine that Pickles is Pickles, and it's going to retrieve the user and groups and attributes, and it's going to send that back to Redshift. So what the outcome will be is Pickles is still Pickles, nobody else, and he's a horse at the barn. Then Redshift is going to use that. So based on user groups, attributes, and service-specific access controls, Redshift, you can say horses have access to this table. So you can kind of see that. And then Redshift will log every time Pickles accesses the data. All right, mind blown. One myth that we're talking about is Identity Center centrally manages fine-grained permission within the application. That does not happen, right? Identity Center makes all the identity information aware to Redshift. The access controls are with Identity Center itself. Identity Center does manage the access to the application, the front door of the app, the front door of Redshift, but not the actual access controls within it. And that's where you'll see, viewing the assignments, you can see where Pickles has different applications. Redshift, we'll talk about QBusiness later on. These are viewing the access controls within lake formation. I showed that to you. You can see where horses have access to treats, humans have access to treats. They're all based on an Identity Center group, and that ID is very, very important. All right, so we're gonna live demo this. So Pickles is gonna query Redshift and make sure that he can only access the right horse treats. And so we're gonna query just the local tables first, and then we'll go down to the next one. All right, so I was Bridget. I don't want to be Bridget anymore. I want to be Pickles. So I'm going to log in as Pickles. Oops, not now. Here we go. Oh, no. All right. Give me a second here. Here we go. Sign in again. Sometimes it gets a little wonky because you change networks. All right, so I've logged in as Pickles. This is my member account. I'm going to go to the query editor. I am also, at the same time as we go into here, I'm going to go to Redshift here and go to the query editor. So I'm going to flap back and forth a little bit between dev and... All right, so I do need to create a connection. And I am logged in as Pickles into Firefox, so this just kind of reloads. So I am Pickles, the user in Firefox. And I'm actually going to, as the owner here, let's see if that works. I'm going to log in as the admin of my Redshift because I want to show you the logs. All right, so Pickles is going to run a query just on local tables. It's Halloween. He has an outfit. So should he be able to look at his outfits? And the answer is yes. He can wear all of these things. That's fantastic. Where did that come from? That came from an access control within Redshift, which I'm going to show you. Oh, it's already preloaded, so I'm just going to keep it so we don't waste time. But horse users can have access to the outfit schema. That's where that access control comes from. Okay, and you're like, well, Bridget, I want to know that he accessed and what he did. All right, so we'll run and look at our logs, and you'll see that it was logged as Pickles once it pops up. That's for local table access. We haven't gotten to the federated access from lake formation quite yet. Should we wait for it? I can come back. Oh, there it is. All right, so you can see I was playing around earlier today, but we have Pickles the horse, and you can see exactly what query Pickles just ran. Pretty darn cool, right? Because it's Pickles, it's the actual user going from there. All right, success. Now we're gonna go over to lake formation. So we've used Pickles, we've obtained Pickles, we passed Pickles, or we used and logged Pickles, and now we're gonna pass. How does this pass happen? It's all based on a role. I'm gonna show you the role in a second. Identity Center gets the user context. It assumes the role, attaches the user context, gets role credentials, and passes it to the next service. This means if you have a denied lake formation, you're bust right here because it's a role, right? And that's the benefit is IAM guardrails still apply. The pro tip here is that those roles between Redshift and lake formation must have STS set context. It must be there. So looking at this role specifically, there's a role that, I forget what we named it, but it was between Redshift and lake formation. And so you can see it has access to lake formation. It has access to assume roles. The Redshift service can do that. And it has the STS set context. This means it can pass that identifier in the role. And when that pops up, it will also log to CloudTrail, which is really powerful. And you can see it was that role, Redshift, and then the service, Redshift, and then there's your user ID, which I can show you in the Identity Center instance itself. All right, so we're gonna go and do the lake formation tables. I'm gonna show you the access controls in lake formation. I'm also gonna show you the identities. You're gonna query data from federated tables, and then we'll go inspect the logs. So here we go, it should be a lot of fun. Demo, here we go. All right, so I'm gonna go back. Actually, I'm gonna start as my admin here with, here's all the things, right? So the horse can look at the treats here, and the humans can look at the treats here, but only human treats. So if you look at, we look at 999, this is the principal, and then B9 is the principal. So you will see here, I'm gonna just show you, this is the, oops, here we go. This is the horses, they have less access here. Only horse treats can they see, whereas the humans can get both the horse treats and the human treats. So let's give it a whirl. We're over here. We are still Pickles. We're in Firefox. So what should happen? Yes? Oh no. Do we need to edit our connection again? Continue? If it doesn't work, you can just... All right, well, let's try the other one. I don't know what happened here. Well, that's a bust. You guys want to see the video? Now I feel really horrible. We are Pickles. We should have access. Let's try edit connection and go back, or I can refresh. I think sometimes this has happened before where our connection didn't work when I changed networks, and I feel really bad about it, and we keep getting errors. So I can show you the video. Sorry about that, folks. But we'll just, the connection seems to be a little off, so I don't know how to get it back. I apologize for that. But I can tell you it worked an hour ago. So we can imagine that did work or didn't work for the user. I can show you as, actually, let me go back and let's play around. We have some time. Why not? I'm going to pop out to the query editor. I'm going to edit my connection. I'm going to go back as Bridget. And let's hope that she has access to both of these tables. Here we go. And you can see, because I want to show you the logs, that's going to be the main part here. All right, you can see that she has access to her treats, and she should have access to the horse treats as well. And then I'm going to pop out over to CloudTrail, so you can at least see that it was event history, event name, access data. Let me just go query. Oh, I think it was called access data, but I forget, get access data. There we go. Oh, well, let's just go down. And you can see all the update connections and through. And this is, let me just, well, I forgot the name of the, oh, there we go. Where'd it go? There we go. There we go. And you can see the event record. And the cool part here is you see this ID right here. And because I did a little cheat here, you can see 26 is Bridget. So it was logged as the user ID specifically there. And that is the cool part about it, because it's completely audible, so you know who accessed your data. When it comes to permission guardrails, I want to make sure everybody knows that permission guardrails still apply for AWS managed applications, and this is because the role is used to pass that user ID around. And so if you deny the service, if you deny access to a specific table, a specific resource, those still apply. So if going back to our demo, you can see, now one part didn't work. I'll go figure that out later. But we have Redshift, we have lake formation at both stages. They obtained pickles details, they passed, they used and logged, they passed, and then did it all over again for lake formation. And at the end of the day, we actually logged pickles, but I used Bridget. So when we talk about user-aware data access, I want you to know these things, because you're like, how do I set this up? How do I make sure it's legit? Each application must be connected to Identity Center, so you need to make sure that's true. This wouldn't work if Redshift wasn't attached to Identity Center. This wouldn't work if lake formation wasn't connected to Identity Center. So that has to be step one. Each service must be connected to the downstream service with an IAM role. That's pretty default. You probably have that set up today. And tip has to be enabled. And that role needs set context in that trust policy. So those are the places where customers get stuck. We are working on services to get tip enabled. We are working on flows so that it flows all the way through. And then along the way, each service is going to go get pickles user data, and you use it, log it, and pass it to the next one. And this is how user-aware data access happens and how it flows all the way through. So you might be saying, but Bridget, we use a third party. So you're adding a third party, what happens? So that third party, that blue box that I just added, will have the identity provider's token. It'll have Pickles. Pickles is authenticated to that identity provider. And what happens is that third party will pass that identity provider token to Identity Center. Identity Center will know what to do with it, because you're going to set up a trusted token issuer with Okta, with the IDP. Then that third party will exchange the identity provider token with an Identity Center token, and then they can assume a role, set that role context, pass those role creds to Athena, and it works just the same way, right? It's assume role with set context. That's all trusted identity propagation is. So why do you need that trusted token issuer? You would use this to establish trust between that third party, the identity provider, and the Identity Center, and the Identity Center instance you have. It must be configured with the same identity provider. If it comes from two different identity providers, Pickles is two different horses. Requirements for a trusted token issuer. Third-party applications connect to Identity Center. There's an issuer URL. You do some attribute mapping, like email to email. This is what it looks like. You can see we have our trusted token issuer Okta. If you click in, you will see the email mapping that we used. Oh, don't need to click in, right here. Took a screenshot of it. So you can see email the identity provider attribute with the Identity Center attribute that is used via SCIM. All right, so now everybody loves Gen AI. Let's talk about Gen AI and why and how this is connected to data analytics. I hope you all are asking yourself this question. So with Q for Business, right, you can create chatbots, you can integrate a bunch of different sources, a bunch of different plugins, you can execute commands, questions, all of that. But it's personalized, and you got to make sure that Pickles is a horse, or you're an admin and you're a user. So this is Q for Business, and this is how it's set up. So we have Q in the middle. It will be connected to your identity provider via Identity Center. It also gets connected to all of those documents and things that it ingests. And then the user gets to query. But you want to make sure that that user has permissions to the underlying data, right? So if, let's say I'm querying and it's a wiki, you want to make sure that it shows manager information because I'm a manager. But if Pickles starts querying, you want to make sure that it doesn't show manager information because he's not a manager. So this is how it works. You have your identity provider, you have Pickles. Pickles gets an identity provider token. Then the token gets changed for role credentials with user context. We just talked about that flow. Those role credentials get passed to Amazon Q, and then Amazon Q will know exactly who Pickles is. Looks familiar, sounds familiar. It's the same thing we just did with Trusted Token Issuer. So you have a workforce application, you want to power it with Q, you need it to become user aware, so you got to make sure you do the token dance. So this is how it works. You will have your identity provider, Identity Center. You have your workforce application. We're going to say Wiki Querier, powered by Amazon Q. Amazon Q will do the token dance for you. Go get the creds. It'll come through the identity provider, do the dance just like we talked about, and then it will have a role. And so you have your identity provider, token issuer, Identity Center gets the user context, assumes role. Q can use those creds to access anything it needs to. Should we try it out? All right, so we have this demo. We're going to walk through the configuration steps. I'll show you the trusted token issuer. I'll show you the applications connected, and we'll go from there. So let's head over to Q for Business. And you can see I have an application. And you can essentially see how it's set up. Access management is Identity Center. If I were to go into the main account, which I can if you want me to, pop over here. This is our master account. You'll see when I showed you the apps before, Q Business was attached to the Identity Center instance. Why is it attached? Well, hopefully you've been listening. So Q Business can go get the information it needs to about the users. So here we go, our applications. And Q Business Sweet Treats. There we go. We obviously had some temp ones. All right. So I'm going to go over to my Q Biz app here. You can find this URL in the console, and I am going to be Pickles. Hopefully this one will work this time. So I'm going to log in. I've logged in as Pickles because I already had a session. All right, let's ask some questions. Can Pickles get a list of horse treats? So Pickles should only be able to get access to the horse data because he's a horse, right? So it's all based on the group access there. You can obviously see I asked. So yes, these are all the horse treats that Pickles can have. Now, Pickles might want to ask if horses like candy corn or ice cream. We can talk about that. It's a little slow, not gonna lie. No answer found. Why was no answer found? Well, because Pickles is a horse, he does not have access to that data. So now I'm going to actually go pop over to Be Bridget. What do you think Bridget's going to learn? Bridget is going to learn about her favorite treats. There we go. Oops. Can I get ice cream? Let's do that one. And she can. Authenticated different, human, horse, different treats. Please don't feed your horse ice cream. I've actually never tried it before. I don't know if it's healthy or not for horses, but that's the difference. And that's all because of that identity propagation that we talk about. We could go look at the logs. All right, so if you're wrapping up, if you're bringing this back to your organization, top 10 items to take back with you is connect your identity provider to IAM Identity Center, connect your data analytics and generative AI apps to Identity Center, enable trusted propagation for your user-aware pickles is always pickles. As I'm seeing more and more Gen AI use cases that operate on data on behalf of users, putting that data access control closest to the data is being really important, because no matter which way pickles comes in, you want the access control to be based on their groups or their attributes, so that horses only get access to horse data. And this is winning. So create a trusted token issuer. This will help with your Gen AI do the cred dance. Use CloudTrail and service logs to track data access and that user. So anytime AWS sees a role credential with that user context set, it will log the user. And that's really, really powerful, because that means you can see what pickles actually accessed and stay up to date about more user-aware AWS. Thank you, everyone, for coming. I'll be in the back taking photos, or not taking photos, answering questions. I'll probably take a photo, though, too. And I apologize for my demo not working. But the one at reInvent, when I did it, it did work. So you can go check it out there on the YouTube. Thanks, everyone.